Welcome everyone to the book launch of Going with the Floe, an Arctic Voyage by Coonoor Kripalani, presented as part of the Asian Festival of Children's Content 2020 Digital Symposium. Please welcome our featured author for this book launch, Ms. Coonoor Kripalani.
Thank you so much, Carlo, and thank you to the AFCC for including my book launch in this digital festival this year. It's a great pleasure for me to be sharing this book, Going with the Floe. Just a quick introduction of myself. I'm a bilingual author, and normally I write in English and Hindi, and these are some of my publications. Just to show you, today I'm talking about this one, and it is born out of actually inspired by experiences from traveling in the Arctic and seeing all these wonderful animals for oneself, and actually learning about how important a geographical area this is for us. So to begin with, I'd like to say that this book actually fits in very well with the theme of voyages of the AFCC 2020. So be it fantasy, or be it a space voyage, or be it an intergalactic one, or one on Earth, as this one is actually on the waters. I think it's a good addition to the theme. Now, if we did take a voyage into space, then we would see the Earth like this. I hope you're seeing that well. And when we look at the top of it, this part is the Arctic Circle, which I hope you all can see. So actually, before I get really deeply into this, I would like to check, to ask the audience how many children there are. Are there any children attending? If so, raise your hands.
And for those of you who can't raise your hands, you can also use the chat function so that we know that you're around.
Thanks, Carlo. Okay, so I guess not a lot of children. Anyway, there's the Arctic Circle, which I'm sure you all can see quite well, right here on the top of the globe. And on this Arctic Circle is the polar ice cap, the North Pole and the polar ice cap, which is a very, very critical part of the globe for the rest of the Earth, because it provides us the greatest source of water, fresh water supply, as well as gives us the coolness that the Earth requires. And so, as we have seen, large chunks of ice are now melting very rapidly and at great pace. And this is actually very dangerous for our planet. When we talk about rising sea levels, actually what is happening is large chunks of glacial ice are breaking off, falling into the sea, where they start melting. And as they melt, the sea levels rise. So last week, I think we all heard of a large chunk of the glacier in Greenland breaking off, almost the size of Paris, And you can imagine how much of a rise in sea level we can expect. So scientists predict that this would be about 2.5 cm over the next few years. It doesn't sound like a lot, but then there have been glaciers, also the ice, the continental ice shelf in the South Pole has also been breaking off and melting. So all this combined creates global warming, creates floods, droughts, and the wildfires that we have seen. So it is actually a great, great, great danger and threat to the planet as we know the Earth today. Now, actually, there's a very fragile ecosystem that exists in the Arctic. And in this fragility survive the animals that I have in my book, which are, of course, the polar bear. There are larger other sea creatures like walruses, of course, whales, sharks, a variety of whales, a variety of marine life, and also great variety of bird life. And these birds, even if they do migrate over time, they need the Arctic, and those few weeks that they spend there are critical in their life cycle. So a great many species are at risk with the climate change that is foreseen. So when I do this story, I actually will show to children, talk to them about these animals, tell them what's special to them, and also the dangers that they experience. What are the things that they need to survive, and what are they going to be deprived of if they don't have the ice? So these are all part of the adventure. The animals are very delightful. I'm sorry, I'm just going to interrupt for a minute. I'm getting a lot of messages in from various people who signed up who are now unable to get on. So I hope the organizers can just maybe attend to some of these requests and allow them to get on.
Sure thing. Thank you, Coonoor, for letting us know.
Now, I'm going to share my screen with you. Sorry, can you?
So while Coonoor is actually...
Can you see the screen share now?
Yes. Not yet, not yet. Can you try to screen share again, Coonoor? And again, for those of you with questions, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of the screens for any of your questions that you have for Coonoor later on during the Q&A.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. We can see your screen now.
Yeah. So as I share a few pages of the book and I'll do a short reading, I would also like to thank Titli, who have made the ebook and published it. And it's called Going with the Floe, an Arctic Voyage. So in all the books that I showed you, or most of them, my the iconic character that's present and often the narrator of the stories is this butterfly. called Titli. In Hindi, Titli means butterfly. So she's present here as well. And the story starts with her visiting her friend Nanook, the polar bear. Nanook is the Inuit word for polar bear, and the Inuits are the indigenous people of the Arctic region. In different parts of the Arctic, of course, the name of the polar bear is different. So, for instance, in Russia, it's called Unka, and in Norway, polar bears are known as isbjorn. But we are now talking about the Inuit culture, which you see in Greenland, parts of Canada, and also a bit in Iceland. So here we have Nanook, who has a cub, and they are standing on the ice near the shore, and the cub is playing around the shore, and mother calls, "Don't go too far," to her cub. Suddenly, there's a loud crack. Nanook rushes to her cub, but it's too late. The ice has broken off, and the cub is swept away in a swift current, standing on an ice floe. Now, polar bears live in the Arctic amidst ice and the tundra. And in the summer, the ice sometimes gets a bit thin, and ice floes are much smaller than icebergs. It's more like a flat disk of ice that floats, but also it melts quite easily, more rapidly than an iceberg, for instance. Nanook tries to chase after it, but it has moved so fast amidst the icebergs, they can barely see it. "Quick," says Titli, "hop on my boat and we will go and find your cub." Nanook and Titli set sail, chasing after the cub on its ice floe. So I'd like to point out here that there are a lot of little facts about the animals that appear in the book, the characters, that are facts that kids would like to know about animals. So one of the things about polar bears is that they are generally solitary creatures, and only mother polar bears will stay with their cubs for about 2 to 3 years until the cubs are old enough to fend for themselves. So here she is very concerned because hanging on to her cub is of primary importance to her at this point. So here they come upon seagulls as they go on this voyage. And seagulls, of course, are very common birds along most sea shores and oceans. And here she asks, Nanook asks the seagulls, "Have you seen my cub floating off on an ice floe?" "Yes," honked the seagulls, "it went that way, pointing south." And so Nanook and Titli continue to sail south. And here again, hidden in the waves, you have little facts about seagulls. Now they come across walruses on the icy coast with their long tusks lying on top of each other and splashing water. Once again, some facts about walruses are written into the waves. And one of the interesting facts is that they weigh 2,000 kilos approximately as on average as an adult. So it's a very, very large animal and can be quite dangerous. But polar bears will sometimes go after their cubs, but that I don't say in the story for children. So the walruses as well are accommodating and point the direction. Yes, we don't see so well, they say, so that's another little fact built in, but we smelt it going that way, the walruses inform Nanook. And here I would like to say that this is one of the most beautiful illustrations in the book, done by Amanda Simmons, who is from New Zealand and unfortunately can't be with us today as we do this launch. But I would like to commend her and thank her very much for the beautiful illustrations she's provided in this book. And now these are one of the most unique sea creatures of the Arctic, the narwhals, sometimes known as unicorns of the sea. They have a single tusk, which is actually highly prized for a kind of ivory, and it's spiraled, which is really very beautiful. But these creatures are very, very shy and very hard to spot. And sometimes you see needle-like things poking out of the ocean, but by the time you get there, they're all gone. And they're gone because narwhals make some of the deepest dives amongst marine mammals, from 800 meters to 1500 meters several times a day. So they can just go up and down, up and down. So the narwhals also reply and give an answer. Yes, they say they saw them going south. And so say the cormorants. And so Titli and Nanook continue on this journey, asking various sea creatures when they come across all these wonderful fish in the ocean. And Nanook says, "Fish, have you seen my baby traveling this way?" And the fish also say yes, and they point them in the right direction. And here we have some interesting facts about halibut that have both eyes on the same side of their faces, and squid, the sotong that everybody loves in Singapore, that actually are masters at camouflage and can make themselves almost invisible. And then they come across a whale who also is friendly, but then the seals are too scared of Nanook because they know they are the favorite food of Nanook, and they all slip into the water. They have nothing to say and no advice to give. And then comes Nanook to the puffins, who are so busy nesting that they too cannot answer because they can't pay attention to anything else. And this again is one of the most beautiful, is another one of the most beautiful illustrations by Amanda. And so we go on, we see various creatures, and I won't sort of belabor the story, but eventually they do find, they do spot the cub after a lot of searching. And here's the cub on the ice floe, a shrinking ice floe that has become so small that its all four paws are all together on the ice floe, holding on tight. And the cub is tired and hungry and hot and frightened and just really wanting its mom, just like any baby would want its mom. And so it cries out, "Anana," to its mother, which is the Inuit word for mother. But the voice just fades over the blue waves. But mom can smell it. She hears that sound on the wind. She hears it. And so they go and find the cub, and it is being harassed by orcas, and there's a huge fight. And does she get to save her baby? Because now let's remember that orcas are 5,500 kilos. They are the apex predator. And will she find her cub? And is she able to save her cub from all these dangers that they've experienced? So the book is actually packed with lots of animal information, lots of beautiful illustrations of the animals, and of course lots of things yet to explore. So it is a book that you could share with your child and have lots of discussions, learn more about the animals than just the information that's given, learn more about global warming, what it means to actually save the Arctic, which is such an important part of our globe. So I'm going to leave it here, and if there are any children, then maybe I could pose, have a chat with them. If they have, so I see there are at least 2 children, and I want to thank you both for being with us, all the way from England, in fact. So I hope you're not disappointed in not hearing the whole story, but maybe I will ask a couple of questions to the children who are here, if they would like to answer. Do they remember the size of a walrus? Do they remember what a walrus weighs?
And again, for anyone who would like to respond, for the 2 children, you can just type your answers on the chat. And Anu has typed 2,000 kilograms, and so did Shoba.
Well done. Thank you. Thank you. So that's for Jahan and Ariane. Thank you. Well done. Well done. And do you remember what the walrus weighs? I mean, sorry, do you remember what the orca weighs? If you'd like to type your answers. Well
And
done.
someone has responded 6,500 kilos. Yeah.
So if you imagine that actually a polar bear is also an apex predator, but its size it's huge. It's huge compared to humans. It's between 350 to 700 kg for a male one, and females are smaller, but of course they grow very big and strong when they are mothers. Their standing height is 1.8 to almost 2.5 meters. That's huge. That a walrus and an orca are that much bigger than them. And they have, an orca has a 10 cm tooth. Their teeth are about 10 cm. So it's that big. So for the children, can you imagine what the mom has to fight to get her cub back? So if you would like to know the end, you can find the book here. You'll see it on the cover. I'll share the screen again quickly so you can see it. Just go back. Right. So maybe I can just leave that on. And so this is actually what these animals face, is a lot of work during the summer months, where they have to feed the birds, for instance, they have to lay the eggs, nest, hatch the eggs, get the hatchlings to fly, and fly over the ocean. Once they start flying, they have to keep flying till that's the beginning of their migration. So it's a pretty intense life for these animals and all these creatures to build up their strength while they can, to face that severe Arctic winter where it'll be dark for 6 months and light for 6 months. That is the other interesting part of the Arctic. Right, so if anyone would like to read the whole book, you can get it here. It's an ebook only. So should we see if there are any questions from the audience now?
Yes, Coonoor, there's actually a couple of questions. But before we go to that, can you tell us a little bit more about the running theme, about the inspiration? Because earlier on you mentioned about the inspiration for writing your books. But is this inspiration a running theme around all of the books that you write?
For quite a few now, yes. A lot of the books are relating to animals and environment, respecting our environment, and also conservation of our environment. So I have done books on jungle animals. I've done a book on the tiger. I've done a book on the leopard. And most of these are actually inspired by stories I've heard or travels, some real life incidents. So yeah, increasingly it is becoming that.
And speaking of travels, Tara actually has a question for you. She says she loves the story and the idea of educating children at an early age of climate change, as it will be something that we will have to experience in their lifetime. She's interested that you mentioned that you were inspired to write the story after traveling to the Arctic yourself, and is asking, would you be able to share a little bit more about the animals that you saw when you were there? And did you see any polar bears? And if you did, were there any close encounters?
Yes, we saw, I was there. I've been to the Arctic 3 summers in a row. And we saw actually close to almost altogether 40 plus polar bears. We had some very close encounters with some of them, but of course we were on the water, and they were in the water, and sometimes on land. So we were able to observe them and sometimes actually interact in a very safe way, I would say. You know, there was obviously distance. We also saw most of the animals that appear in the book I have seen, except I would say for the snowy owl. I also did see other animals that don't appear in the book, for a couple of reasons. One is that they are more land-based, which would have been musk ox, reindeer, Arctic fox, and what else? Yeah, I think mainly these ones. And the reason is also actually that I wrote the book before I saw those animals, so they didn't quite find a place in the story. But I think it fits in quite well because normally they would not be so easy to talk to from a boat. You would have to be on land to see them. And also wolves. We didn't see any wolves. But these are
It's still
also animals that could be found there, I suppose.
quite a number of animals, I guess, that you've seen on your trips to the Arctic. How
Yeah.
long did it take for you to actually finish this particular book, and what was your process like?
So the process, actually, this book was inspired on the very first journey, and I wrote it as we were actually voyaging. So it so that's another voyage theme. And then I sat on it, and I also shared it with fellow travelers. And in fact, the illustrator was also on this trip. So her illustrations are from actual sightings. And the story started out quite simply, just, an encounter with all these animals. But it's laden with so many more issues that we face, that the animals are facing, but that actually impacts us with global warming. And actually, we could see, even from one summer to the next, in such a short period of time, less ice in the following year. The first year was really icy, and then we didn't see that much ice again. So it's been interesting to observe.
Actually, someone was asking about that because you mentioned that 3 summers ago, you went to the Arctic 3 summers in a row, and then they were asking whether there were actually any differences year on year in terms of the ice, or whether the temperatures were actually higher.
Um, yeah, sometimes actually it was high. It depends how far north you go. So it depends really where you are, but yeah, it was warmer. The temperatures were a bit warmer.
All right. We have one question about the illustrations, and Shirley says that the illustrations and the story are lovely, but she does want to ask, how do polar bears fight? And did they fight in the sea or on the ice? And this is connected to another question that's actually asking whether you've experienced an encounter between polar bears and orcas fighting as well.
So here I've taken a lot of author's license. I never saw, I also, sorry, didn't see orcas. We didn't see orcas. So this is a bit of license. And I should say at the outset, no animal should be a villain, even though, we talk about a wily shark and we talk about the orcas threatening. There is a food chain. Every animal has to eat. So it's not wicked or otherwise. So I haven't seen polar bears fighting, and I haven't seen them fighting each other also. But the lore of polar bears is very different in different areas in the Arctic that you travel. So in some cultures, it's kind of the manly thing, and they have to kill them as soon as they see them. And that old culture also is something that the indigenous communities have to learn to shed. Although they are granted quotas for hunting some of these animals, I think it will be less and less, excuse me, as time goes on. I think that polar bears are probably, they are quite adept at catching prey in the water. They hunt for seals in the snow, and they can pull them out of the water. But my fight sequence with the orcas is an imagined one. And you have to suspend belief sometimes for a good story.
No worries, Kunur. So let's talk about the illustrations because I see the illustrations in the book are quite fascinating. Can you talk to us a little bit about the working relationship that you had with the illustrator of the book?
Yeah, I realized by chance that my fellow traveler was actually an amazing illustrator, because I just happened to see her sketchbook. And I thought, like, wow, what are you doing these for? And she said, oh, just, I'm just. So I thought, well, I actually have written up a little story, and would you like to illustrate it, read it, and see what you think? So we actually took it from there. She read the book and enjoyed it, and she was sort of challenged by the idea of doing this, because for her it was actually a first time. She's this is her debut as a book illustrator, and so she actually just took it from there, and she had done drawings of different animals that we had seen along the way, and so she then created these illustrations to suit the story, and we had a very nice working relationship. And unfortunately, she couldn't join us today. She's um, hiking somewhere and has no Wi-Fi. So
That's amazing that it's like everything had to fall into place now. Yeah.
yeah.
Everything fell into place during one of those journeys. Someone is asking, can we expect a story soon about the Antarctic, and will Titli make it there?
So I haven't managed to get to the Antarctic, and there is so much with happy feet that I would have to think about it. But if I get there, perhaps I'd be inspired, because strange as it sounds, the the icebergs in themselves tell a story, so just seeing sheets of ice is 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 almost like a religious experience. It's so inspiring. Yeah.
Thanks, Kunur. What do you want kids to actually learn from the book when they read it?
So I think the book has many elements to it in terms of not just conservation and environmental well-being of the planet, but also in terms of friendship, who comes to whose help at a time like this, um, caring, um, bonding between mother and child, a mother's love. She goes to all all lengths to put her own life in danger for her cub. Um, so there are all these undercurrents of emotion that also play in this story. Um, and I would say, really, for children, it's the friendship and kindness of others that assists her in her quest. So, yeah, I think all these underlying features come out in the story.
Thanks, Kunur. And again, for those of you who have questions for Kunur regarding the book and her writing journey, please feel free to just type in your questions at the Q&A over there at the bottom of your screen. I guess my next question is, what's next, Kunur? In terms of the books that you'll be writing and probably the animals that you are going to be highlighting in the books that you hopefully will be writing in the future?
So I do have some projects in the works which will focus mainly, excuse me, on our part of the world, in this hemisphere, and there will be a lot of stress on aquatic animals and oceans again, and also some species that are unique to Southeast Asia. So I can't divulge too much more, but it's in the works, and hopefully we'll see more of this and see a different kind of interplay. But the message is once again looking at our planet, learning to respect our environment, and learning, well, not learning so much as actually understanding how intertwined our lives are with nature and our environment, and how important it is for us to respect that and conserve it.
That sounds exciting, Kunur. We have a
Yeah.
question from Manjeet, and Manjeet is asking, will there be language translations of your books available anytime soon?
Well, I'm hoping that since this book is out there, that some publishers will be interested to do that. Normally, as I said, I do write in Hindi. My books are bilingual. And this time round, I didn't do that because actually I don't have, or I'm not sure Hindi has a vocabulary for these animals. So it was a little bit harder. So a shark is a shark and a polar bear is a polar bear, I guess. I'm not sure. Today, as I was looking at other names of polar bears, I realized that in many other languages, for instance, Russian and Norwegian, the names I gave earlier, the name for polar bear is actually white bear. In English, it translates to white bear. So maybe we can use Safed Bhalu as the translation for Hindi, if there ever was to be a Hindi translation. But as these animals are not easily seen there, it becomes a little bit, I think, a little bit more complicated. But definitely worth a try, yes. Yes.
We look forward to having the translations available then, Kunur. But which leads me to my next question. Why the decision to make the book available on ebook only?
It's still looking for a home for a print version.
All right. So I guess what kind of advice can you give to kids and probably adults who also want to write their own books, particularly picture books like yours?
I would say to anyone who wants to write, just write. Don't think about it too much. Just start writing. And if you are inspired, the story will just flow. And allow it to flow, allow it its own scope, and then you will be able to create. But you need to get it out there. You need to let it come out of you. That's how this book came. It just had to be written. It just had to be said. And it just came from my surroundings, actually. And then actually I sat on it for a while, for a couple of years before, really getting into it and putting it together. And I have read it at schools, and I find that children really interact with it. It's been quite promoted very nice conversations with children. I think they feel quite inspired. I think they're happy to learn about these animals that seem so exotic to them. So I think if you have a story, you just have to give it out there, put it out there.
Sounds like good advice, Coonoor. Now, someone is asking, well, this is formats again, will there be e-audiobooks for this particular book?
My other ebooks are audio ebooks, and this one isn't. I think because it's quite easy to read and for for oneself, or maybe for parents to read to children, so it's something they can share. It's written for children between the ages of 3 to 8, so I think pretty soon a 5 or 6-year-old could probably read it on their own.
Thanks, Coonoor. So someone is asking, will you also be doing books on animals in settings kids will be familiar with, like the Jurong Bird Park, for example, with similar messages targeted at kids?
I have a project in mind, not exactly set in the park, but yeah, for areas that children are more familiar with. Yes, in this part of the world. I
Do you think it's important to talk about how kids are able to relate to the places so that it's easier for them to understand the stories?
I think that children don't necessarily need to actually be there in that space to relate to a story, because I mean, after all, they also have fantasy books and so on. So I think it's always nice to have books about things that you can see just out your window, but sometimes maybe that's not novel enough because you know it, you can see all these things right there. So I would say I don't think that's an overriding factor in creating books, but it is something I would like to do. I would like to focus more on this area for now, because once again, some of the things, animal life and bird life that I have been observing, and I think all of us during lockdown have observed how all the animals have come out of their habitats in the absence of humans, essentially in their spaces, that there are stories to tell. There are stories to tell of actually where we are, even if we are in a city or in some other remote area. So I think these do have a place, and these are stories I plan to tell.
Well, we're excited to hear all those stories that are coming from you, Coonoor. So maybe you can tell everyone where they can find the book.
So the book is available on several e-platforms, and you can find it if you go onto the Tasitala website, the ebook listing, and look for it here under my name or under the title. And it's available on Apple Books, Google Play Books, Kobo, Central, and one other. So a Kindle. So pretty much on Amazon. So pretty much most platforms that people would use for books can find, will be able to buy it. They'll be able to find it.
That's a lot of platforms. So I guess hopefully a lot of people will also find the books. So please do.
I have to thank Tasitala for, because they put all their ebook publications are available on all these sites. So that's a great benefit, and I do want to thank them for the work that they did to put this book on all those sites. That's quite important for an author to have the visibility and have the availability as well.
So we have just a couple of minutes before the end of the book launch, and we're still able to accommodate a couple of more questions. So if you do have any, please type them in on the Q&A function at the lower portion of your screens. We have someone asking, what advice can you give children in terms of understanding the importance of climate change and what they can do, especially in this time where some people are actually denying the fact?
Well, I think for children, one of the most important things we can do is to show them how to respect nature, respect their own environment. So, of course, important not to throw garbage, not to be wasteful, not to use a lot of plastic. Beach cleanups are an important thing because they can see for themselves. In Singapore, for instance, that would be one of the easy things. You can see for yourself how the tide brings in all this plastic. So even if you didn't create it, it's actually coming in with the tide. It's coming in, which is a huge indication of the interconnectedness of our globe. The water is actually going all around, and people do analysis of where the garbage comes from, you know, so you can see actually how far things have traveled and traveled to your shores. So when you understand how all this is being transported around the world, and someone else's garbage is messing up your beach, your garbage is going to mess up somebody else's country. So if you are attuned to this and have a sense of actually how respectful one should be of the environment, then I think that is the first step for children to understand global connections and the fact, of course, of climate change. When you hear of storms and cyclones and bushfires and droughts and general misery, then we must understand, and they must understand, that these are things that are actually all the results of our actions of global warming.
We totally agree with that, Coonoor. All right. Do we have any more questions from the crowd? If there's anyone else who would like to ask questions or anyone who would like to leave comments, you can use either the chat for your comments or the Q&A for your questions. And here's one from Prakriti. Can a butterfly survive in the Arctic, or was that artistic liberty?
That's completely artistic liberty. And as I said, you have to suspend belief when you read books like these or watch films, you know, that are futuristic or supernatural. Then as a creative, you ask your audience to suspend belief and just go with you. So go with the flow.
That's a great way to play with words, Coonoor. All right. Does anyone have any more questions? Please do so. We have about 5 minutes before we end our book launch for today. And again, our book launch is for Going with the Floe, an Arctic Voyage, written by Coonoor Kripalani. Does anyone have any other questions? Please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screens. I'm thinking if we don't have maybe some words of advice, some parting words, I guess, because we only have like 4 minutes left. Some parting words to our audiences, and especially for the kids who are here.
I would like to thank all the children very much who have attended. It's been a great pleasure for me to have introduced the book to them, and I hope that you will read the story and enjoy it when you read it. And even if you read it just as a story, just for the fun of it, that's good enough for now. And all these messages and subliminal messages will make themselves apparent later. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank AFCC Digital 2020 for giving me this opportunity to share this book with all of you, and hopefully it'll spread the word. So thank you.
You are most welcome, Ms. Coonoor. All right. So we have one last question to answer. It's more like a request, I think. Someone is asking about a story about otters soon. Is that going to be possible?
Well, I think that the otters of Singapore are actually calling out to tell a story because they're just everywhere. And I loved them at first, and now I don't know whether we should make them heroes or villains, or how do we deal with them. So it is something that these are one of the animals that I think actually have inspired a lot of authors. We have seen a lot of stories on otters, and they are generally very cute and charming. But we've also seen videos. I haven't seen this personally, but I've seen videos from a friend who saw this, of armies of otters fighting for territory in the river in Singapore, in the canal actually, and it was a bloody battle. So I think it could be quite an action-filled story, actually. So definitely something to think about. Thank you for that suggestion.
Definitely something to think about, especially when it concerns our otters in Singapore, right? All right. If there are no more questions, I guess that's the end of our book launch for today. Thank you very much, Coonoor, for sharing your book with us.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, everybody, and thanks for joining me. Appreciate all of you being present from very inconvenient times away from Singapore. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for joining. Yes, thank you very much for joining. And let's close this one. Thank you for joining us. This book launch is presented as part of the Asian Festival of Children's Content 2020 Digital Symposium, happening from the 2nd to the 4th of October, and featuring close to 50 speakers from Singapore and beyond Asia. Please catch our last book launch for the day, 30 minutes from now, using the same link. And don't forget to buy our book, this book, Go with the Flow, and the rest of the other books of the featured speakers at our official bookstore. To find out more, please go to www.afcc.com.sg. Thank you very much for joining us, and please be informed that once this webinar is over, everyone will be automatically sent out of the link, but you can join in again for the next book launch if you're available. Thank you very much for attending this afternoon, and we hope you have a great day ahead. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you, Carlo. Bye.